welcome everyone to the We Are In It Together podcast. I'm Jamie Lynn, and today I am here with Christine Lathren. Yay! Christine
Hello.
is an MD and she has a master's in public health and a clinical background, and she works currently as a researcher for the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in the area of self compassion. And then additionally, Christine is also the mom of two boys. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, delightful.
Exciting.
Oftentimes at the beginning, I do something a little playful in my podcast, which is we talk about our feelings habits, and we talk about them in the context of animals, where there's four animals. There's a chameleon that hides feelings, a beaver that kind of obsesses about things, a bear that blows up about things, and then a deer that feels, even ashamed of having feelings sometimes. So I like to say I'm kind of a mix of all of them, but I'm probably more bear, beaver, deer mix. And did you want to share your feelings habits?
Sure. And when we first did this, I was like very clear that I was beaver deer mix. And then I think as time goes on, I realize more and more I've got all four. They come out at different times. I think the beaver and the deer are more noticeable to me, for sure. I'm more aware when those things are happening. So maybe that's it. But even the chameleon, sometimes I'm like, that's coming out a little bit today. I'm really trying to avoid thinking of or feeling that way. So I think all four, but beaver deer is my primary.
Beaver deer. So a
Beaver deer.
little thinking about things,
Oh,
thinking about
absolutely.
things, and feeling like, oh, is this okay? Yes, thank you for sharing that. And again, I like to normalize that for everyone to know that we all got feelings habits, right? We're here to talk about our feelings habits and how we can be healthy with our feelings habits. So I'm curious. So in self-compassion is going to be our kind of theme of the day, and also that self-compassion specifically in the realm of parenting. So can you share a little bit about, and by the way, for listeners, a heads up here that in podcast episode number 4 of the first season, I was interviewing Christine's son, Grant. So just a little, we have like an intergenerational link now here in the podcast. So tell me, Christine, how did you come across self-compassion?
So I would say that um, I started noticing that I was really struggling um, really early on. But I would say when I was in medical school, I noticed that I was having a lot of trouble with anxiety um, and not really putting self compassion on my list of things that might help that because back then we didn't know. And then when I became a parent, which was my most important job in my mind, like I was going to work the hardest at it, I really valued it. And it kind of kicked my butt at times. It's hard to be a parent. And I noticed that um, I was often getting triggered about things that I never thought I would really get triggered on, and that my kids' big feelings were really impacting me in a way that made me not so kind at times. And I remember clearly this moment where I was driving down the road with my two young kids in the back. I had a newborn and like a 5 or 6 year old, and there were big feelings in the car. And I pulled over because they were so big that I couldn't drive. And I pulled into this parking lot that I'd never been into before. And I was feeling so angry. I mean, I just was so angry at the situation. And I was just in my head about, oh, this is. And I looked up for a moment from like, interacting with the kids and saw a sign that said yoga this way. And so I opened the door to my car and I realized that I was right by like a beautiful pond and it was making this beautiful sound, like water was flowing, was like and the thing said yoga this way. And so I was like, kids, we're going to go in here for a second. And it kind of pulled me out, like it pulled me out of whatever I was in. And I got the flyer for yoga that weekend. And this was 2013. And I think I like the confluence of being so overwhelmed and so angry and so upset and so frustrated with myself, for being so angry. And then seeing the sign for yoga, I kind of took it as a sign like, okay, I really need to figure this out. And so that began my journey. And so I went to yoga that weekend and I started inquiring more about what I could do to take better care of myself and my emotions, which led me to look to mindfulness. So I took a mindfulness course and that really opened me up to like, wow, I actually do have a lot of feelings that I never really realized I had. Like I just had no idea I was feeling all this, and became a lot more aware of myself. And from there, started thinking about it from a professional standpoint. Like, I think I'd really like to study this, and connected with um, Dr. Karen Bluth at UNC, who was studying self compassion, and um, kind of fell into it from there. Took courses in self compassion, and only taking the self compassion classes did I realize how much I actually needed it. I had no idea that I was hard on myself. Like, this was not even in my mind that this was like a difficulty or a challenge that I was facing. I was really opaque to myself. I'm just being honest. Like I think growing up in the 80s, like we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about things when they were hard, um, culturally or within my family. So I was not used to inquiring within myself about what I was feeling and what I might need. So it was really, really a interesting journey that ended up going from personal to professional. So then I ended up studying it, which has been completely awesome. I'll just say that.
But I'll ask you about that a little bit later because
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a research nerd. I love hearing about the research, but I know, anyways. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But I'm curious. So and I too, by the way, had a similar entry point of yoga to mindfulness,
Hmm.
self compassion.
Isn't
Right?
that
Like that was
interesting?
my same, and each one had a little relief. Yoga had a relief because it calmed my nervous system. Mindfulness had a relief because I could let myself be messed up, and and then self compassion had a relief because I could love myself when I was messed up, which of course makes us less messed up, right? It just
Totally.
does. It's kind of crazy because it's counterintuitive, and I would think you were saying how you weren't even aware you were hard on yourself. Again, having gone through medical school, it's amazing. I think how many high achievers
Oh yeah.
don't realize
Oh
the
yeah.
voice that's underneath the surface that's critical.
Absolutely. I mean, we're so task focused in our culture. We're just like, I'm moving ahead, and we're pushing ourselves. We're pushing, pushing, pushing. And we just think that's normal. And we don't realize what's underlying it is a deep fear of not being enough, And it's so pervasive in our culture. It's really hard to miss, or hard to notice. You miss it. And then when you wake up to it, you're like, oh wow, this is actually toxic. There's another way I can be, and I can still accomplish and achieve, and actually can accomplish and achieve more without this kind of relentless push and this feeling of just not good enough.
Yes. And this makes me think of a book that I bought but I never read. I tried. It was like a lot of pages. John Kabat-Zinn had this book called Full Catastrophe Living.
Oh yeah, I know that book.
Really,
I have that book.
parenting is one of these things that ultimately, and especially if we've got kids sometimes that are a little, some kids are just more easygoing. Some kids
Mm-hmm.
are less easygoing, and if we get a bunch
Mm-hmm.
that's not as easygoing, and then we're trying to parent them, and we're wondering what we're doing wrong. It's one of those things where like effort doesn't necessarily equal outcome, right?
Oh,
There's like,
so
and
true.
it's one of those things that I think undoes a lot of people, but it's also this opportunity. Like in that book, Full Catastrophe Living, John Kabat-Zinn talks about how the floor opening up like this is the opportunity to let go and do something different.
Yes, I think that, and I think on top of that, it's like the children, I think, hold up a mirror to all your imperfections so well. Like they trigger you, and it's like you see your mess, but there's nothing that motivates you more than your children to try to want to get better. Do you know what I mean? Like there is no other motivator that I can think of in my life than, okay, I've got to do this for my children. And that has been innate in me since before I had them. I just always knew that I was going to put my all into being a mom. And so anyway, I just think it's really fascinating to consider how there's two sides, right? Like there's this deep, like, oh my gosh, I realize how messed up I am now. And oh my gosh, I am so motivated to figure this out and to be the best person I can be for these children.
So ironic that that a big part of the solution is becoming more aware, more present, and more loving to
Mm.
ourselves as we are. So tell me how did so you started to learn self compassion, you got curious about the research, but then how did it affect you personally? How did it affect you in your parenting when you started to become more? And what did it look like to become more self compassionate?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll just say that it wasn't overnight, that's for sure. Like this was a long, and it's still going. Like it's the journey continues. So it's not like, okay, now I'm self-compassionate, all done with that, right? So that's important to name. So I'm still on this journey. Um, but I would say that I think slowly, I think the yoga and the mindfulness first really helped me to be more self-aware. And I think that was an important first step for me because like I said, I was really, I think the word is opaque. Like I really wasn't aware of how deeply I was feeling about things or why I was feeling these things or what my needs might be. I never thought to question what I might need. Um,
That chameleon of hiding, it was an
yeah,
unconscious. There was
it was
unconscious feeling
unconscious.
about it. Yes.
I mean, and I think it goes, I mean, for me, it goes really deep. I mean, I think going way back to when I was a kid, I was a caregiver to my mom, and my mom had MS and was, you know, required a lot of help physically and cognitively. And my dad, doing the best he can, was really stressed. And so I think my response to that was to attune to others' needs and not really notice what was going on for me. Right. So I was just like so outwardly focused, and the internal stuff was just like happening, and I had no idea. And so people pleasing and really wanting to get things right for other people. And I think through the self compassion journey, one of the biggest things I have realized, and this affects my parenting and affects everything, is that there is not one right way to do things. I think for some reason, I've always had it in my head that there must be a right way to do things, and that right way is what I must do. You know, I must, to be a good whatever, mother, spouse, child, helper, I must always do what is the right thing to do. And there's only one right way. So if I'm not doing that, then I'm just, you know, I must be bad. Must be something must be wrong with me, you know? And so I was always looking outside to what is the right thing I should be doing. I never looked inside for that information. It was always like, well, can you tell me what I should be doing here? Because as soon as you tell me, I'm going to do that. Kind of like a student teacher kind of thing. Like that's why I think I excelled in school. Like, teacher, tell me what I need to be doing. I will do it, and I will do it perfectly to the T as best to my ability, right? Because now I know what's expected of me and I'm going to do it. But life is so much more complicated than that. It is so much more complex and nuanced. There are so many things about human beings and the way we operate and our nervous systems and our past experiences, how they influence us, that there is no good godly way that we can have one right way to do anything ever. And so being open to and flexible about, this is still a deep work for me because I still get stuck in it sometimes. And you know this because you work with me. You know this about me. But I think that's one of the biggest things that I have learned through self compassion is just like, I can be okay with not knowing that what the right answer is at all times because there isn't actually ever one right answer. There just isn't. In parenting as well. I always wanted to be doing the right thing for my kids. And when they were having a hard time, clearly it's because I'm not doing the right thing. So I think when they were struggling, it was a deep, deep, deep wound to myself. And it really led to me to be burned out. Like, I mean, I think burnout is a really interesting idea, a topic of like you're emotionally exhausted, which I definitely was. I felt totally ineffective and incompetent at times. Like I don't know what I'm doing here, and at time, and I also felt um, like I might need to give up on this. I'm just not good at this. Like, and I tried to avoid, and that's like a really dangerous thing to happen to you when you're parenting. And so self compassion helped me re engage in a way that was like, it's okay that I don't know what to do here. It's okay. And understanding that underlying fear of not measuring up, which I never knew I really had, but I do have it. Like when it rears its ugly head, I can at least talk back to it. At least I have some resources to be aware and not always take everything so darn personally. So I think that's one of the biggest things with my kids too, is that I have developed more capacity to not think there's only one right way to do things. I've developed more capacity to be with them when they're struggling and not react and just listen. I don't do that all the time, but when I do, it's really magical. When I accept them for whatever they're feeling, even if in my mind I have 5 reasons why what they're saying doesn't make any sense whatsoever, I keep that to myself. I'm able to regulate and talk to myself, like, in a different way that allows me to just be with whatever they're struggling with rather than trying to fix it. And so I don't know, that's a long-winded answer, but self-attunement allows me to be better attuned to them, which is a really amazing thing. Again, not does not happen all the time. Just want to make that clear. It didn't happen this morning. So we have a repair process that has to happen after school today. So I mean you know what I mean? Like it's a work. That's why it's a practice. It's like you're never there. But gosh, tough things are worth doing.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that, Christine. And it's bringing up some thoughts for me about work of, if some of you might be familiar with Brene Brown, and how she's a researcher on well-being, but also a researcher on shame, and how perfectionism, it can be like a shame shield. So those of us who are perfectionists might not realize that oftentimes under the guise of perfectionism is a real fear that if we don't get it right, we're bad. And I do think you highlighted this, and I think I'm still realizing how much I have this still going on in the background, in the unconscious, and I it's this idea that there's two things. One is a belief that if I do everything right, I will get a good outcome,
Yeah.
and then two, if I'm not getting a good outcome, like it's kind of a related reverse thing. Something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and both things are untrue.
Yeah.
This is, I know when I learned to teach mindful self compassion, we talk about why do we have an inner critic, and one reason is because it gives us an illusion of control.
So
Right? And I
true.
think sometimes that's why we grow up, especially I think sometimes when we grow up in circumstances and parenting circumstances where we're children, sometimes acting as caregivers for our caregivers, or there's just
Yeah.
chaos. We develop stories that make us feel empowered. And unfortunately, that story of if I do everything right, I'll be safe,
Yes.
or my environment will be okay. It's a lie that over time becomes this boulder that's just sitting on us.
Yes. Oh,
And so,
I
yeah,
can
we
relate to
absolutely
that.
need, yeah, we need something that can soothe us, that can help us to actually gradually let go of the lie and say, life is
Absolutely.
imperfect. I am imperfect. I will try to show up the best I can, and I will try to love my imperfect children the best they are. And that actually, ironically, makes us a much more effective parent.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So true. All of that. I mean, how ironic is it that we're walking around with these giant boulders on our back, and for the longest time, we have no idea why we can't walk fast. It's like, why is life so hard? I have no idea. But like, meanwhile, we're carrying around this boulder with us. So of course we can't walk fast. Of course we feel like stuck at times, like really stuck. And I can really relate to that feeling of feeling like very stuck and very unclear why I was feeling stuck. I didn't know. So I think mindfulness and self-compassion together are just such powerful tools to understanding yourself and accepting yourself in a way that I don't know if anything else can.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. That's why I teach it. That's why I teach it, right? So
Yeah.
I know because I did interview your older son. I know that one of the things he shared when I interviewed him was that I asked him about his journey to using mindfulness and self compassion tools, and he shared that when you discovered it, he said around age 13, he like you went from he said this you went from blaming yourself when he
Mm-hmm.
would have big feelings and
Mm-hmm.
feeling like too much to being more understanding. So have you noticed a ripple then from your own practice to like obviously I know it did ripple, but I'm just wondering
Yeah.
what have you seen, and again like obviously disclosing only what feels right, but as far as your
Yeah.
kids ability to be self-compassionate growing as you develop your own ability to be self-compassionate.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it really has changed a lot of things for us. And it's just it is strange that one person in the house can have this, like you said, a ripple effect to all others. And especially a parent or yeah, a mom. I think that, and I would again, I would be interested to hear more about what Grant's perspective is on how specifically I have changed. But I know what I've been working on, and what I've been working on is talking to myself in a kind and non-judgmental and supportive way when they're having a hard time, you know? So I'm really attuning to myself, and sometimes it's like it's in the acute moment I am like big time if I'm resourced, like if I've had a good night's sleep and I'm like in my right frame of mind, I am really countering. Like I can hear the voice in my head saying this is a threat, this is dangerous, I need to shut this down, this difficult feeling that's happening in front of me, because often big feelings are feel scary to me. You know, your kids have a big feeling. It's not like the sad feelings, but more the big explosive feelings feel kind of scary, right? And so often, I mean, I know I'm not the only one on this. Like big feelings don't feel great, and we want to shut them down, and we want to tell the kids why they shouldn't be happy. We want to talk them out of their bad feeling. And I realize that doing that does the opposite. Trying to shut down or find all the reasons why that's ridiculous that you're feeling that way only makes things worse. And kind of coming to that realization slowly over time and recognizing that if I can manage myself in those moments and talk to myself, and even if like the big feelings are like directed at me, which often that's the most hard ones for me, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like
I do. I
the
do.
the kind of you suck mom feelings, that come out at you. And I know I'm not the only one on this. I mean, I know this happens in many households. And so normalizing that, like, but um I think just being able to I with a friend, a common friend that you and I both have, about like when those big angry words come at me, like imagining that I'm moving away and they're not sticking to me, like I'm like dodging them. Like I literally am like, "Eh." And in my finest moments, again, doesn't happen all the time, but I can talk to myself about this is not about me. This
Mhm.
is about him. And often, my children, they're not able to express in the moment what it actually is. Like there's no point in trying to figure this out together right now because we're in a big feeling. So asking a bunch of questions is not going to help either. Like that's not the moment to do it. And so I think that has been a game changer. Just being able to sit with the difficult feeling and discomfort of me watching someone else be uncomfortable, not take it personally and get defensive when it starts coming at me, and just literally realizing that an intervention is doing nothing. Like I'm sitting here, I'm being with, and I'm doing literally nothing, but that is something. I don't think I've ever like would have thought that before any of this journey, that like it would be okay to just not do anything or not say anything when someone was having a really big feeling. Um, and when you do that, and when you do that, it often that's the only time I ever get an apology ever. Like it will almost always without fail. There's a big feeling, there's hurtful words with whoever I'm with. And then later on there's like I'm really sorry I said those things, I didn't mean it, this is what was going on for me. And it's like, wow. I mean, that repair was beautiful. And I do the same thing too. Like I come back and own my big feelings. I repair. And that we never did before. Like that's a big deal in our house, that repair process. And I don't think I could sit and tolerate all the difficult feelings of being with someone who's so upset had I not had that inner voice that's telling me, this is not about you. This is about him. You can manage this. Like just the internal monologue that I'm having, and then I'm shifting, it's not sticking. This is not about me. This does not mean you're a bad parent. This is normal. We all have big feelings. I have them too. Something must be going on and we'll figure this out later. This is not the time. And I can just, so I mean, I don't know. I think that that in and of itself, like the way that I have been able to at times manage those big moments has felt significantly different. And I think it's opened up a world of when I'm having a big feeling, I'm not a bad kid. Because I think before that was the message I was sending, not intentionally. And I think now when I'm like able to just sit with it, even if it's attacking, um, and even if I can say something like, you're, you're still a good kid. Like if I can throw that in there, if I can get the wherewithal to say, like, I know you're having a hard time, but you're still a good kid. Um, like that complete recognition that even when I'm at my messiest, I'm still okay and I'm still a good kid. Like that in and of itself is a game changer. It's a game changer. To lower the level of shame on having big feelings is huge. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he would agree with that. I think he probably would. Um, but or either of my children, because it happens. I mean, it happens in families all across the.
Yeah, with spouses, it's like,
It happens with exactly. This is not just parent, not
yeah,
parent child. It's like any kind of relationship that you're in where you care about the person and you have a close relationship, and you're having to dodge the hurt.
absolutely. And I appreciate how, again, this reminds me again of that habit of the deer of feeling shame, of the continual reminder it's not personal.
It's
And
not
how much
personal.
realizing it's funny because self-compassion involves I'm not alone. And part of how we can remember that it's not personal is like it's this other people get mad. People get it's anyways.
Yeah,
It's this idea that I don't know. I think I used to have a story that if my again it's the same thing. I'm circling back to
yeah,
the story was if my child is acting like this, something is wrong with me, which is
exactly.
a codependent story.
It's not a
Well,
good
more
story.
of a healthy story. My child is having a hard time, and this is not about me. Can
This
I
is,
stay present and loving?
yeah,
That and that
totally.
intervention. Yes.
Well, I mean, part of self-compassion, I think, for me, has like being in greater touch with what reality is. Like as simple as that sounds, is like when you really dive into self-compassion, you start to realize like, okay, humans have all sorts of things going on for them. They're complex webs of beings that have past experiences and biologics, and the 5 things happened to me earlier today that I didn't know happened to you because I wasn't with you and I wasn't part of that. Like we have all sorts of things going on. It's never about one person. I mean, we are complex, nuanced beings, and there's never like, it's not ever squarely on me to make sure that everything is a-okay with you. That is not, it's not humanly possible for me to make everything a-okay with you. And not only is that not humanly possible, that wouldn't be good for you if I always made everything easy and a-okay for you. You know? You know what I'm saying?
I think you're speaking some wisdom that I'm still digesting. Honestly, like I'm still digesting. I have a strong dose of belief in my omnipotence, and like, which is you know what I mean. I'm still recovering from
Yeah.
believing that I have power and that it'd be good if I had power that I don't have. I don't. It's just so
Well, I mean, I think
still there.
we can go to the research even on this
Yeah.
one because
Okay. Perfect. Perfect.
would
Yes.
that be a nice segue?
Now,
So
perfect segue.
the research says that when we are stressed, when we're having a moment that's acutely, not chronic long-term stress, but like let's say we're having a difficult time or have something that we're facing that's just really hard, and we have self-compassion come in at the same time as a resource to us. What happens over time is that we become more adept and open to supporting ourselves in future episodes of stress, and that's why we become more resilient. If we never had stress, or we never had stress plus self compassion, that resilience does not grow. That resilient, you need stress to grow, and you need resources to support you during that stress. If you have stress plus resources, then you grow. But if you've never had stress, you have no idea how to support yourself. You have no experience with it. You have no mastery. You have not gained any skill in supporting yourself. So, really, I mean, I think that message is just so, I don't know, it makes me feel like good to know that my job is not to take away all the bumps in the road for my children. And especially to know like those big feelings and learning how to get through them and manage them are helping them grow. That is what life is about, is like understanding yourself and growing. And if you didn't have those hard times, if you didn't have those bumps, we wouldn't grow, you know? So I don't know. I just, anyway, that helps me in the times where my perfectionistic hat comes on and says I have to make everything okay all the time. Like that's not a story that we need to tell ourselves as parents.
And for us as parents to remember that oftentimes a piece of the resources that our kids need is our loving presence. Ah. So
Hmm.
I'm curious, what are anything more? I mean, for those of us who are still feeling like we're growing it, or it's not accessible, or we're still coming to on this idea that, you know, is it really true? Is it, am I really, like, anyway, any words of wisdom for those of us who are just kind of at the beginning of the journey here?
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Um, One of the things I love most about self-compassion is that there is, again, no one right way to do it. It is completely based on what you need to hear in that moment. So, getting acquainted with yourself is the first step. Like, what is going on for me? And just listening to yourself. And that takes time because we spend our days just so focused on tasks and what has to get done that listening to ourselves and attuning to ourselves is just not usually part of the equation. It's going to take conscious effort and practice. I don't know. And there are going to be days where you're going to fail. They're going to be. That is completely normal. Like I don't know. It's one of those things where just like, yep, expect to not always be able to attune to yourself. But I think that when you take a self-compassion class or you read about self-compassion or you watch a video about it and you think, okay, here are the steps. I need to do one, two, then three. I need to do first, I got to be mindful of this is hard. Second, I got, no, not necessarily. Because every moment is a different one for you. And what's going to work for you today may not work for you tomorrow. But the most important thing is to listen to yourself because no one else can support you like that but you because you're the only one that's privy to what's going on up here. So that's what I really love most about self-compassion is that it's self-prescribed. It's not like I'm gonna follow these 5 steps and then I'm gonna be a-okay. I'm trying to get away from that in my life. And so it gives you that flexibility, that wiggle room to be like, this is actually what I need today. It's not this, it's this. I don't actually need to be tender today because that's not working for me. These are the words I need to hear right now. Yes, that works. Or, that didn't work. Let me try something else. I thought that might work and it didn't. And you're always reevaluating. You're always curious. So, like, what's better than curiosity, right? And I feel like it's the same thing with our kids. It's like we have to always be flexible and curious because every day is a new day. Really, let's be honest, they're always changing, they're always growing. And just when you think you've got it, I know how to respond when that happens. Then poof, something else happens, and you're like, I thought I had that. No, I don't. It's so humbling. So just, staying flexible and curious.
Beautiful. And it's funny because as I listen to this too, I have more questions, but I'm aware that we're right at the edge of time. But can we just dip in for a moment? Because I know just I wanted to touch a little bit on attachment because I know you study
Mm-hmm.
and you write papers on intergenerational self-compassion. And I know there's a relationship between like secure attachment, like when kids are securely attached to their grown-ups and feel like they're safe, they're secure, will show up, not perfectly, but over and over again, we'll make repair when we botch it, that the kid is going to grow up and have more well-being and be more self-compassionate innately. I guess my last question is actually less about less about this idea of us helping our child be securely attached to us, but there's something that's called grown secure attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Is there anything in the research that talks about that at all and how self compassion might be related to us feeling like having some of those benefits of secure attachment? Or maybe you just want to talk about benefits of self compassion, but I'm curious about if there's a link in the research with that.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, I know that that's the good news of all this is that attachment I think we used to think attachment was set early in life and that's just what you had for the rest of your life. And that's not the case. I think we know we can even induce it. We can induce secure attachment through experiments in the lab. We can start out one way and then do something to help you feel safe and secure and then ask the same questions later you feel more securely attached. So I think I think that's a positive message to know that if you have an insecure attachment, you can grow more secure over time with the right tools and the right mindset and the right help. Um, and I do think that there is a deep link between self-compassion and secure attachment. And it comes from this feeling of safety and security that we feel when we're with an adult, as a child, when we're with an adult that sees us, is there for us, is consistent, is warm, is responsive. And though that feeling that we get when we're young from a parent who's doing that for us can get internalized. I mean, this is what we see in the research, and there's it kind of becomes your internal working model of like what is what to do when we're distressed, because often secure attachment is what happens when we feel distressed. What does our caregiver do? Really, like that's a key thing, is that secure attachment happens in times of need when the child has a need and is asking for help. And so there's this self caregiving model where it's like we can internalize and have our own be our own caregiver, essentially. Like when our parents are not available, we slowly grow the capacity to regulate ourselves. And the ways that we learn to do that are vary depending on what we're exposed to. But I think the exposures are it's not just our parents, it's the messages that we get from culture. I want to like broaden it. I think there are a lot of like attachment really is the parent-child bond, but there's so many other things that affect our ability to self-soothe. And I think some of it is, when we're in the classroom, do we have a teacher that's understanding? Like there are other attachment-like figures that happen for a child throughout the day. We know coaches, grandparents, how do they respond when we're having a difficult time? And also, what does our culture say about what we should do when we're struggling or when we've made a mistake? Do we grit through it and push ourselves, or do we pause and give ourselves kindness and support ourselves? And we have wiring. Our wiring is such that we are always looking for threat, right? So there's so many things going on. There's a lot going on, and it's not just attachment, right? I know, but I think having a secure attachment certainly makes it more likely that you will grow self-compassion. You have higher self-compassion and we know we can grow self-compassion. Self-compassion is absolutely a skill we can learn. And I don't know that learning self-compassion in and of itself switches your attachment security. I don't know that, but I would have a hunch that it helps you process whatever was difficult in your parenting experiences, such that you might orient to your parents and their flaws in a different way. How does that sound?
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, yes. And I know, I do know for myself that, and then we'll have to be coming to a close, but I do know for myself, I think before I had self-compassion, I was always trying to feel okay from the outside in.
Mm-hmm.
Like what behaviors could and somehow it gave me that something from the inside out. And I think that's part of a product of secure attachment. Again, I don't know what the research says, but just my own experience that when I know, and I think it's because I knew I could be present with myself.
Yeah.
And it made me feel safe.
Yeah.
It made me feel safe. I would not abandon myself when I was a mess. I was there.
You've got your back. You've got your own back.
That's right. That's right. I got my back. Right. And then for people that want resources, I know there's correlatory research, and I know there's people that take interventions. Have you seen, is the research pointing to like any interventions that are more effective, less effective as far as growing self-compassion?
I mean, I think what we're seeing is just that there's more and more adaptations to self-compassion interventions for certain populations. That is certainly happening. So, adaptations for people or individuals that are in a certain situation that's particularly difficult. And so you're getting self-compassion skills, but it's with a group of people who really understand what you're going through. And so you're getting the social support in addition to the self-support. So it's like a double whammy. You're really seeing that common humanity, like when you're with people that can understand your specific life circumstances, you know? So I think that's a big thing that we're seeing. I'm seeing a lot more with early childhood, like infant and earlier interventions to get parents to learn self-compassion early so that the bonding experience happens early, and that I mean, the earlier the better, right? We know this. Like, of course, we want to help parents maybe prenatally. Honestly, that would be great. But yeah, and I think we're learning more about like your lovely program where we train parents and kids together, and then we ask them like, what was that like for you? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about your mom? What did you learn about your dad? You know, I mean, the incredible growth that happens in that specific way, I think is interesting. I think it's a different kind of growth than maybe learning it on your own, because you're impacting a dyad. You know, you're impacting the communication that happens, but on both sides. I think that's really magical. I don't know. It's really interesting and important to consider that. Like, we don't just taking one person from a family. Obviously, in my family, what happened was I started learning, and it influenced others in my house to also learn separately from me, but to also learn. Although my youngest did take a course with you, so we did co-learn, I will say. But yeah, I think that's what we're seeing, and a lot more, hopefully, randomized control trials, right? So randomized control trials are where you compare self-compassion skills learning to some other type of learning that also is supportive, like a support group, or a different kind of compatible but not the same intervention, to see which one does better. And I think we're going to start hopefully seeing more of that. I think it's tricky because self-compassion has this common humanity element, and anytime you get a group together, common humanity is going to be really present. So the question is the skills that you learn in self-compassion supplementing and even greater than the common humanity in like a typical support group? I think we need to answer that question.
Yes, well, it sounds like both matter.
Both matter.
And that this learning in community can make a big
Learning in
difference.
community, absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Christine, for your time. I'm really grateful, and I look forward to further research projects where I get to benefit from your dedication and your skillfulness in helping people find the resources of self-compassion.
Thank you, Jamie Lynn. It's been so fun.
The world keeps turning, things change. We have new obstacles that are thrown in our way. In our way. You can't let it hold us down. Together we'll get around. You just have to look inside, and you will find that we are in it together. I know within my heart you are not alone. You are not, and we are in it together. I've known it from the start. You are not alone. You are not alone. You might feel lonely and down. You might be thinking things will always be this way. Be this way. But you got a friend in you. Self-compassion will get you through. You just have to look inside, and you will find that we are in it together. I know it in my heart. You are not alone. You are not, and we are in it together. I've known it from the start. You are not alone. You are not alone. We've got Bunny. You're not alone. Doodles, what can you do? Spots, we can be aware. And Snuggles, I care about you. When life gets hard,